I do not join in the belief that the African is our equal in brain or in heart. And I believe that if we can, in any fair way, possess ourselves of his services, we have an equal right to utilize them to our advantage. Francis Galton, 1857.
What shall be done with the 4 million slaves if they are emancipated? This question has been answered and can be answered in many ways. Primarily, it is a question less for man than for God, less for human intellect than for the laws of nature to solve. Our answer is, do nothing with them. Mind your business and let them mind theirs. Your doing with them is their greatest misfortune. They have been undone by your doings, and all they now ask and really have need of at your hands is just to let them alone. Frederick Douglass, 1862.
Psalm 71, 10 and 11. For my enemies speak against me, and they that lay wait for my soul take counsel together, saying, God hath forsaken him, persecute and take him, for there is none to deliver him. And these are the thoughts that the heathen have towards us. They think that the Most High, he's just done with us. He allow us to be in captivity, for them to mistreat us and do all these evil and abominable things to us, and that he would never come back and try and save us or deliver us from their hands. And these are the thoughts that they think. So they sit and they make counsels and tumults against us on how to, persecute us, come against us, get us to break the law, statutes, and commandments, and think that the Most High is never coming back to deliver us.
It is the stupidity of man to think that he can do evil, even some monstrous evil, and it won't have any backlash on himself. But of course, it seldom works that way. And the moment he figures that out, he starts looking for a way to avoid the repercussions of what he's done. This is what happened with slavery. In the early 1800s, as it began to look like the end of slavery might be on the horizon, white America started to be concerned that a day of reckoning was coming. The primary fear for the average person was of retribution and insurrection, and that was a reasonable fear. After all, it's illogical to think that you can do to a whole group of people what was done to African Americans and think that they will just take it lying down forever.
You see, this is the thing with these heathens. They can dish it out, but they never can take back what they dish out. And they think that they're getting away with all this wickedness and evil doings to the children of Israel, but they're not. Colossians 3:25, it says, he that doeth wrong shall receive the wrong in which he have done, and there is no respecter of persons. And then we know Revelations 13 and 10, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the swords. Here is the faith and patience of the saints. Like, the Most High, he's a just God. Like, you can't do these evil and wicked things to his chosen people and then expect to just walk away or not to receive any recompense upon you for the things that you have done. That's not the Most High. And he's going to recompense these heathens for what they have done.
And of course, there were things like the Nat Turner uprisings. But for the wealthy elite, their fears went beyond things like insurrection. They were worried about the financial impact. Remember, it was not just the cotton plantations that profited from slavery. Whether you're talking about the banks or the insurance companies, the railroads, even the newspapers, the fact is that almost every aspect of the American economy was at some level or another invested in the slave business. You also need to recognize that for the wealthy elitist who controlled this system,
see, and that's another thing that we have to put emphasis on. The fact they view slavery as a business. It is a business. They use us, they work us, they worked our ancestors for years and years and years and years and years with no pay, built up America, no pay. Then they work us for dirt cheap, because this is a business. And if you have a lucrative business going on, who in their right mind is gonna shut their business down? And I mean, it's very lucrative. It's working for them. They're not thinking about ever letting us go, ever releasing us, ever allowing us to leave, y'all. And this is why Yahushua have to come back and deliver us, because their plans is never to let us go. But their houses should continue forever, that they continue to build off the backs of the Israelites.
Slaves were an asset as long as they were slaves. But at the moment they are set free, they become a liability. Slaves were an asset as long as they were slaves. But at the moment they are set free, they become a liability. And what the elite knew was that the end of slavery would instantly release 4 million people into the economy who had been kept uneducated and effectively unemployable anywhere but the cotton field.
Worked hard. I'd get up at 4 o'clock and get my breakfast done. Just at dawn of day, I'd go to the field and be pick cotton.
Mr. and Mrs. Haywood Jenkins of Sharkey County, Mississippi have, between them, picked cotton for over a century.
My boss man came along. He says, Mary Jane? I said, sir. Says, I say, when you wash? I said, I washed last night. He said, I don't want you to do that no more. That's my agent, you know. He says, every Friday morning or Friday evening, you wash. And let all the children stay there with you until you get through. When you get through, then y'all can go back to the field and wait. Now, the agents was mean, some of them. Some of them was mean. They want to whoop the colored people. And that time, the white man come along. He says, hey, but you ain't in the field yet? He just had started applying. He said, yes, I've just not had to eat my dinner. God damn it, you ain't doing a goddamn thing. Says, God damn it, I ought to take this damn stick and frill the hell out you. He said, no, he said, if you frill the hell out of me, goddamn, I frill the hell out of you. It make me feel bad if I was under them, you know, how mean they was to treat us like that.
And what they were concerned about was that this was going to bankrupt the American economy. Taxes were going to go through the roof to take care of these people. Crime was going to be rampant. The prisons were going to be flooded. There was going to be this population overrun. And in the North, the biggest fear was migration from the South of these black people. The other fear that these people had was intermarriage between blacks and whites would lead to a loss of racial purity.
You see, so even the heathen realized interracial marriages and mixing causes impurity to their bloodline. Even though they're not the royal bloodline, the Israelites are the royal bloodline. So if we're the royal bloodline, why then would we want to mix our royal seed with a heathen whose seed is spoiled? That doesn't even make sense. So that's what our people have to grasp and realize, like, not to intermingle these heathens.
The question was, what were they going to do about it? And their initial thought was that they would just send all the slaves back to Africa.
I don't believe it for one little second. We know through the precepts it said all that took them captive held them fast and refused to let them go. So don't think for 1 second they was planning on letting us go.
This plan was called colonization, and it had broad support among the wealthy elite. In fact, the American Colonization Society was even funded by the United States Congress. But in the end, colonization proved to be unworkable, and the idea was eventually scrapped. But about that same time, a new philosophy was emerging in the world. It was called eugenics, and for some, it seemed like the perfect solution to what had become known as the Negro Dilemma.
I do not join in the belief that the African is our equal in brain or in heart. And I believe that if we can, in any fair way, possess ourselves of his services, we have an equal right to utilize them to our advantage. Francis Galton, 1857.
Francis Galton is known as the father of eugenics. He actually coined the phrase eugenics. So he believed in trying to increase those he felt were superior in stock and decrease those he felt were inferior. Francis Galton came from a very wealthy family, a family that made its wealth from the slave trade. And what a lot of people don't know is that Francis Galton was a cousin to Charles Darwin. Francis Galton took Charles Darwin's philosophies and ideas and thoughts, and he actually put them into practice, and that's what we know today as eugenics. Eugenics and evolution are related in that they both see what they consider to be the highest form of primate, such as the gorilla, as almost indistinguishable from what they consider the lowest form of human, the African and the Aborigine.
At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider. for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890.
Charles Darwin is very well known for writing The Origin of Species in the 1800s. This book gave rise to evolutionary theory. What people don't know is that there was actually a longer original title to this book, and that was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Now, copies and editions that they made afterwards eliminated that phrase about the favored races. Evidently, they understood then that it was politically incorrect.
Oops. Was that a backfire or was it?
Some may defend Francis Galton because eventually that he rejected slavery, but they do point out that all of his wealth did derive from the slave trade, but also it needs to be known that he, as well as other eugenists, did not reject slavery until after it had ended, and they could not any longer exploit blacks legally. So at that point, it would have been quite easy for he and his cohorts to reject slavery. I think this is a point that we all have to really realize, that the eugenics movement was not invented by the everyday average white American, but by a select group of wealthy white elitists that had often used this ideology to pit all of white America against black America. And so we see that indeed that truly is the case even to this day.
Average Negroes possess too little intellect, self-reliance, and self-control to make it possible for them to sustain the burden of any respectable form of civilization without a large measure of external guidance and support. Francis Galton, 1873.
Eugenicists believed that Africans were inferior not just mentally, but physically, and that left to themselves, left alone, they would not make it. The problem is, it didn't work. With that failure, the eugenicists moved on to what is known as positive eugenics. In positive eugenics, the eugenicists wanted the white population to reproduce, to have so many children that it overwhelmed the black population. But that didn't work either. Next, they moved on to what they called negative eugenics. They knew that they could not round up all the blacks in the nation and execute them, so they decided to create an environment where they would convince the blacks to severely limit the number of children they were going to have, and thereby commit race suicide.
The problem of the socially fit must be treated not as one of color, but as a problem of the spread of feeble-mindedness. Dr. Charles Davenport, 1913, director of the Eugenics Record Office, Cold Spring Harbor, New York, and co-founder of the American Eugenics Society.
The eugenics realized that they could not promote their agenda simply because they knew it would be viewed as politically incorrect and socially unacceptable. So what they did was use code words that were once successful in slavery, terms such as feeble-minded, unfit, words such as imbecile, immoral, criminal. They tagged those labels upon the targeted community. These words were less inflammatory, so it let society more or less not be totally alarmed of the original intent, but deep down inside, I believe everyone truly knew what segment of society and what people they were actually talking about.
Even a cursory glance at the charts, photographs, and diagrams used to popularize eugenic ideals reveals that the unfit were swarthy, black, and ugly by Anglo-Saxon standards, with flattened noses, wiry hair, and prognathous profiles. Harriet Washington, author, Medical Apartheid.
I be saying it all the time, family. They want to stop people that look like you and me They want to decrease the population. They want to genocide people that look like us. They want to push out there we're feeble-minded, we're unfit, we're immoral, right? Ugly, flattened noses, wiry hair. They don't like, so that's why I push us. I push my people. I'm always for my people, because at the end of the day, they always for their people. And as you can see, their eugenics failed. They will never, ever, like I said in my last video, ever be able to reproduce more than us. You can't view a person's social status or their income or their condition, especially when you put them in that condition in the first place and refuse to give them anything to make their situation better. Stop them from reproducing and having children. Like, really? The Most High, he said he created male and female. That was the so-called black man and black woman. He said multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over it, right? So that was a blessing that the Most High gave to the children of Israel. So I don't know why they thought their inferior recessiveness could overpopulate us. That's never going to happen. But at the end of the day, family, we have to keep our eyes open, because they always have agenda. They're always making tumults and plans and plots and passing laws and bills and policies that's against us. This is nothing more but Psalms 83. It said, keep not silence, O Lord, and hold not thy peace, O Lord. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and them that hate thee has lifted up the head. You know, they always wanted to cut us off from being a people, that our name would never be remembered, right? And they thought that eugenics would cut us off from being a people. And they still have other agendas that would cut us off from being a people, stripping us of our name, our identity, our lineage, our custom, and then try to sterilize us through our foods and eugenics and reproduction and abortion. But like I said, the more they oppress us, the more we multiply. The Most High has always made that be such, or else they would have been able to exterminate us. But the Most High didn't see fit. So with that being said, this is to open the eyes of my people. Realize the agenda has not stopped. It's always going to be agenda in place to rid us, depopulate us, decrease us in numbers while they increase their numbers. But it's just not going to happen. With that being said, we have to acknowledge our sins, return back to the Most High, and keep his law, statutes, and commandments. Shalom.